Here we have a Les Paul Historic 2002, I think. 59 reissue. It's real light, it's real pretty. And the first thing I do with something like this is ask the customer, what don't you like about it? And he said it plays stiff. Well, if you look down the neck, it's got a lot of relief in it. More than you'd want. It's coming uphill towards the nut. As long as the truss rod works well, I'll be able to straighten that out. It'll sound better too when the neck is straight and stiff. Well, I don't like to see that much truss rod thread sticking out from the acorn nut before I've even adjusted it. It's not the end of the world, but you'd rather see a little less rod peeping through. What really happens when you're tightening a truss rod and this much sticks through, at a certain point you can't get your wrench on it because it bottoms out inside the socket. And if that's happening at this end, that means down at the other end, the lug that holds it in the neck, it's moving forward in the wood. The first thing I'm going to do is make a mark on this so I know where it is now. That's where I was, right there. And I'll loosen it counterclockwise. Turn it that direction. Here's the Gibson. It's got a 5/16 acorn nut on it, and it's loose. There's no tension on it. No wonder there's so much relief in this. I'm going to go ahead and remove the nut and clean it up. Maybe put a little Vaseline on it and start from scratch. That's what I always do. I clean this stuff. You'll be surprised. You'll get paint and lacquer in there. I like to have a little Vaseline on the face and a little bit inside. I'm going to put a little Vaseline on the threads. Just that little bit of lubrication makes everything work better. If that has friction and it's tight, you're not getting the true reaction out of your neck. You'll find a lot of truss rods that don't want to cooperate work magically once you give them a little lube. You could use paste wax or some paraffin or beeswax. I like Vaseline. Now I'm snug again, but you'll notice that my black mark's over here now because I cleaned those threads and lubed it. Now it's turning a little bit further before it gets snug. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I just put a piece of tape on here and marked it with ink at every quarter so you'll know how many turns I'm going. Now if I turn this that direction, we can get some idea of how much I turned this truss rod before I got the neck where I want it, which will either be straight or even in a back bow. If I get the neck in a back bow, then I can loosen the truss rod into straightness, which is a lot better than fighting it by wrenching on the truss rod. It's being held at this end, so I can pull back on the neck, not asking the rod to do all the work. I'm going clockwise, a quarter of a turn. And it's engaged now, but it's not doing a lot of work. There's about a half a turn. That's 1/2 turn. Here goes about 3/4 of a turn, and that's where I'm going to check it. I have a notch straight edge that lets me read the fretboard, not the frets. Before I ever had a metal one, I made plastic ones. This is from an old T-square. I made this one out of binding material. Right now, it's dead flat. All that up bow relief is gone. It might almost be in a little bit of a back bow. I'm going to tune it to pitch, and I'm going to run these thumb wheels down and take the bridge down until it buzzes. If you do that, it proves you're not a chicken. I'm being sort of a smart aleck to say, proves you're not a chicken. But that's the way I felt when I was young and I got my first guitars. I was scared to death to touch them. You know, the biggest worry when you don't know what to do with the guitar is you'll adjust something wrong and never be able to get it right or get back to what you think it should have been. Guitars don't come from the factory the way they should be. They're rough set up and they're sent out all over the world, and you're lucky to get a perfect setup. Go ahead and run the saddles down so low, run the bridge down to the body till the strings are laying on the frets. You can't really hurt anything. Now, I'm just going to raise the bridge up till it starts to play good. You can raise it up under finger pressure, but you'd have to loosen the strings. And I'm not against that. I can't turn that thumb wheel. It's pretty stiff. There's a lot of string pressure on it. You can use pliers, but if you do, you'd have to protect the finish. And I don't use pliers. I used to, and I have, and I've marred up the finishes. This is a good little tool. It's got little teeth on one side, so it's right and left-handed. With this, you can get a good grip and you can rotate that. And since the saddles are not individually adjustable, I'm just going to raise and lower the two outside E strings so they look good. Then I'll measure them. I'm reading the gap from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string, and I'm seeing about 3/32 of an inch. That's 93 thousandths. And a heavy 16th on the treble. If I go in there with the tool like an action gauge, it measures out in thousandths of an inch. That's a little more accurate. I'm reading about 90 thousandths under that string. That's on the bass E. On the treble side, I'm about 70 thousandths. That's fairly comfortable. Now if I tune up now, I can give it a test. Now that I've brought the middle strings up to pitch, and I've set the outside strings, the two E strings, they seem a little stiff now, which is good. I flattened them all the way down. Went as scary as I could, brought them way up high. Now I can lower them down, sort of by eye. At this point, measurements are only to get you close to where you want to be, and then you have to play it and look at it. I'm going to take it down lower, a little bit at a time. Now I'm going to look at this bridge setup again with my radius gauge. It's a little flatter than perfect. I need to lower this with a file and this, possibly the A. We're talking thousandths of an inch. I don't think it's a big deal for a player to have to invest in a couple of tools to do some of this setup work. This is a nut and saddle slotting file that you can use on bone, ivory, plastic, or metal. We use them on the nut and we use them on bridges. But if you had two files, a 10 and a 20, you could do any slot you needed to. These saddles have already been notched and I'm just cleaning them up. This is a 10 thousandths. And I'll just pick off any burr the file created. You're going to get metal dust. I blow it, vacuum it, or brush it off. Don't wipe it off. Not on the finish, it would scratch. There. I've just lowered the action a tiny bit. Now I'm ready to set the intonation. To do that, I want to change strings. I don't want to use old strings, especially strings that are about 3 years old. When the strings are off, I'm going to clean up the bridge, lube the threads of the saddles, and clean the fretboard. It's kind of grungy. Put a piece of tape on the thumb wheels for a second so they don't move. So those are going to hold those thumb wheels where I want them when I clean this up. The guy says he hasn't played this for a couple, 3 years, and he used to play 9s, and now he's got 10s. So I don't really care where the saddles are set. I'm just going to move them a bit so I can get at the threads and lube them and put them where I want them to be. When I'm talking about not very much lubrication, and I'll remove most of it in a minute. Just want to get some on there. When the saddle runs forward, it's going to pick up a little bit of that. These are real stiff saddles. They're tight in there. I'm going to clean off the fingerboard, and to do that I want to tape off this area. I don't want steel wool to get on the pickups. You can use masking tape and newspaper. What I use is something called sign painter's tape. You can go to a sign shop, they'll know what you're talking about. It's extremely low tack. It's paper. It's big enough to cover stuff in a hurry. And I have it. And all I'm doing is cleaning around each fret and shining the fret as I go. You can't just use any old steel wool. It's got to be 4/0 Liberon. Liberon. It's not impregnated with oil. I think it's made in Germany. I can use a magnet in here and pick up that steel wool dust. Sometimes I'll put the steel wool over the magnet, and then it doesn't get any dust down. I just don't want to have the magnet near the pickup at the other end. By the time I get from one end to the other, at least with this particular fingerboard oil, it's already soaking in and drying. I'm still going to remove anything on the surface. That's all it needs, just a little bit. I'm just putting it on and taking it back off again. And what I don't get off has gone into the wood and will protect it. I'm going to clean the pickups. They're grungy. I'm going to raise them up a little bit so I can get at them. I'm cleaning that with a little polish and scratch remover. This particular one is called Novus number 2. I can't get it all off the oxidation that you're looking at, but I'll get enough of it off. Now we have a clean neck, clean fingerboard, a straight neck, clean strings, clean bridge, clean pickups. It sounds brighter, chimier. A lot of that's because I've straightened the neck, and it's just more resonant. I'm a guy that likes a straight neck and the strings as low as I can get them, like a race car. I'm going to set the intonation. That's a little bit flat. If it's flat, you move the saddle forward. If it's sharp, you go back. Here's where it's a little difficult to get in there because of the pickup mounting ring. I've got a screwdriver here that's perfect for this job because it doesn't run into the pickup cover or the mounting ring when it gets into that screwdriver slot. It's something to think about. If you don't have the right screwdriver, you're going to mar it all the way along that line. I measured these slots and they're about 32 thousandths of an inch. And I filed that back till it measured 32 thousandths and fits in there tight. And that same tightness happens to fit pole pieces too, which is convenient. You don't want to slip in a pole piece either because you'll mar it and eventually it opens up and doesn't work anymore. When you turn these little screws, sometimes the saddle will peek up on you and start to jump out of the slot. And you'll have to very carefully push it back down. Once you've lowered it so that you're really happy with the action here, you have to be happy down at this end too. If you press down here, all the way across at the 2nd to 3rd fret, you want to see a little bit of light down here over the 1st fret. That one's barely tall enough. You want to be able to press on that string and get a little motion out of it, which this has, so I'm happy with it. I don't know if the camera can hear that bright, clear, ringing sound. If I loosen the truss rod right now and put the neck back into relief where it started, you're going to lose that crystal clean, crisp sound. The wood.